Let me ask you something honest. And I want you to actually sit with this question for a moment rather than brushing past it. When was the last time you went to bed feeling genuinely satisfied with how you spent your day? Not just tired. Not just busy. But truly, deeply satisfied, like you had given your hours to things that actually matter to you? If that answer doesn't come quickly, you're not alone. Most people I talk to feel this low-grade frustration simmering underneath their daily routine. They're doing a lot. They're always moving, always responding, always occupied. But somehow, at the end of each week, they look back and feel like they've been running on a treadmill, a lot of motion, but very little distance covered. Here's what's interesting though. The people who seem to have everything figured out, the ones building businesses, learning languages, raising healthy families, pursuing passions, they aren't working with more hours than you. They're working with the exact same 24. What separates them isn't luck, or talent, or even discipline in the way most people think about it. It's something far more accessible than that. It's the daily habits they've quietly built around how they treat their time. And that is exactly what this audiobook is going to walk you through today. 10 transformational habits that shift you from simply being busy to being genuinely productive. From spending time to investing it. From waking up reactive to living intentionally. We're going to go deep on each one. Not just the what, but the why each habit works, what it looks like in real life, and how to actually start doing it. So whether you're driving right now, folding laundry, at the gym, or walking your dog, I want you to listen with your full attention, because somewhere in what follows, there is a shift that is meant specifically for you. Let's begin. The first habit is something deceptively simple. And yet the vast majority of people skip it every single day. It is this: decide, before your day begins, what that day is actually for. Think about what happens when you don't do this. Your alarm goes off. You roll over and pick up your phone. Maybe you check your messages. Then social media. Then you realize there's something you forgot to do yesterday. You scramble a little. You grab breakfast on the go. By the time you sit down to actually work, or study, or create, an hour or two has already slipped by, and you didn't even notice. By noon, you feel like you've been busy all morning, but you'd struggle to name one thing you deliberately chose to do. This is what life without a plan looks like from the inside. It's not catastrophic. It's just quietly costly. Now imagine the alternative. You spend 10 minutes, just 10, either the night before or first thing in the morning, identifying the 3 things that absolutely must happen today. Not a list of 20. Not a sprawling to-do scroll. Just 3. The 3 things that, if they get done, will mean today genuinely moved you forward. There's something powerful about naming your priorities before the noise of the world gets to you. When you decide in advance what matters, you stop being a passenger in your own day. You become the driver. Here's a question worth asking yourself right now. If you honestly look at your last 5 days, how many of them had a clear direction when they started? And on the days that did you feel more in control? More accomplished? I'll bet you did. The 3-task approach works because it forces you to be honest. When you can only pick 3 things, you have to confront what's actually important versus what just feels urgent in the moment. And that distinction, between important and urgent, turns out to be one of the most valuable mental skills you can develop. So tonight, before you sleep, or tomorrow morning before you look at your phone, write down your 3. Just 3. And watch how differently your day unfolds. Now, there's a reason daily planning alone isn't enough. Because even with a list, even with a clear intention, something will come to pull you away from it. Something always does. Which brings us to the second habit, and it's one that our entire modern world is working against: the ability to protect your focus. Here's a number that should disturb you. Researchers studying workplace behavior found that after a person gets distracted, not after they finish reading a text, not after they scroll Instagram for 5 minutes, but the moment the distraction occurs, it takes an average of over 20 minutes for that person to fully return to the depth of concentration they had before. 20 minutes. For a single interruption. Now think about how many times a day your phone buzzes. How many times a notification pops up? How many times someone calls your name, or a browser tab catches your eye? If you're getting interrupted 10 times a day, which is conservative by modern standards, you're potentially losing over 3 hours of deep, effective thinking, not to the distractions themselves, but to the recovery time after them. This is why so many brilliant, capable people end up at the end of the day feeling like they worked hard but produced very little. They did work. They just never got into the kind of sustained, concentrated effort where real work actually gets done. So what do you do about it? You have to build what I like to call focus containers. Chunks of time, anywhere from 45 minutes to 90 minutes, where you are completely, uncompromisingly unavailable to distraction. Phone on silent, notifications off, and ideally, your phone in a different room. Studies have actually shown that the mere presence of your phone on your desk, even face down, even silent, reduces your cognitive capacity because part of your brain is always monitoring it. Put it away. Physically away. And here's something I want you to think about. What would it look like if you gave your most important work just one protected, distraction-free hour every single day? That's it. 1 hour where you go deep. Over the course of a year, that's over 360 hours of concentrated, focused effort on your highest priority. That is the kind of consistency that builds something real. Ask yourself this. What is one thing in your life right now, one project, one skill, one goal, that would absolutely transform if you gave it one focused, undistracted hour every day for the next 3 months? Whatever just came to mind. That's where your protected time needs to go. The third habit builds on this idea of focus, but it goes one level deeper. Because it's not just about protecting your time from distractions. It's about protecting your energy from the wrong work entirely. Here's what I mean. You could spend a full 8 hours at your desk, distraction-free, intensely focused, and still make very little real progress if the work you're doing isn't the right work. Energy is not just a physical resource. It's a cognitive and emotional one too. And just like a phone battery, it depletes throughout the day, and once it's gone until you recharge. The question isn't just how much energy you have. It's where that energy is going. Think about a typical week. How much mental bandwidth gets consumed by things that, if you're honest, don't really move the needle? Obsessing over small decisions that don't matter long term. Getting pulled into other people's dramas. Scrolling through content that leaves you feeling somehow emptier than before. Attending meetings that could have been a 2-sentence message. These are all energy withdrawals. And they add up fast. The practice of energy alignment, which is what I'm calling this third habit, is about getting honest with yourself about which activities give you returns and which ones just drain the account. Think of it like an investment portfolio. You want to put the majority of your energy into assets that grow, not into expenses that disappear. For a student, this might mean spending less time on the easiest subjects where you're already strong, and channeling more effort toward the areas that could lift your overall results. For a professional, it might mean doing your most creative, complex thinking in the morning when your brain is sharpest, and saving administrative tasks for the afternoon when energy naturally dips. Try this over the next week. At the end of each day, quickly note where your energy actually went. Not where you intended it to go. Where it actually went. You might be surprised, maybe even a little uncomfortable, at what you find. But that awareness is the beginning of something important. Because you can't redirect something you haven't noticed yet. The fourth habit is one that most people understand intellectually but consistently fail at in practice. And that's because overcoming the pull of avoidance, what most people call procrastination, isn't primarily a time management problem. It's a psychology problem. When we put something off, we almost always tell ourselves a story about why it's fine to wait. I'll be more ready tomorrow. I need to think about it more first. I'll do it after I've done a few easier things. But the truth that most of us already know is that tomorrow is just today with a different date on it. And the easier things have a mysterious way of multiplying until the important thing never gets done at all. Here's what's actually happening neurologically when you procrastinate. Your brain is trying to protect you from discomfort, The task feels hard, or uncertain, or potentially uncomfortable, and your mind, which is wired to seek safety and comfort, steers you away from it. The avoidance feels like a relief in the moment. But it's a very short-term relief that creates a long-term problem, because the task is still there, and now it comes with a side of guilt and anxiety. So how do you beat this? The first tool is embarrassingly simple, and that's precisely why people underestimate it. It's called the 2-minute rule. If something takes less than 2 minutes to do, do it immediately. Don't schedule it, don't add it to a list, don't think about it, just handle it right now. This keeps small tasks from accumulating into an overwhelming mental backlog that makes you want to avoid your to-do list altogether. The second tool is task decomposition. When a project feels paralyzing, it's usually because you're looking at the whole mountain instead of just the next step. You don't need to write a whole report today. You just need to write the introduction. You don't need to learn an entire skill. You just need to complete one lesson. Break it down until the first step is so small it almost seems trivial. Then do that one step. Momentum is your ally here. Once you start, the doing becomes much easier than the anticipating. And the third tool is the most counterintuitive. Give yourself a deadline, even when no one else is giving you one. Open-ended timelines are procrastination's best friend. When there's no urgency, our brains create their own comfort and drift. But when you commit, and I mean genuinely commit, to finishing something by a specific day and time, something shifts. The decision has been made. All that's left is the doing. Here's a question I want you to sit with. What is the one thing you've been putting off for the longest time? And what would your life feel like if it were already done? That feeling? That's available to you. But only on the other side of starting. The fifth habit is closely connected to everything we've talked about so far, and it might be the most immediately practical thing in this entire script. It's about learning to make decisions about your time before your emotions get involved. In other words, setting priorities in advance, so you're never having to choose between things in the heat of the moment. Here's why this matters. When you're in the middle of a busy day, everything feels equally urgent. Your inbox, your notifications, the colleague asking for a quick favor, the task you said you'd do last week. Your brain gets flooded, your stress goes up, and you start making decisions based on what feels most pressing in that moment rather than what's actually most important for your long-term goals. But here's the thing. Not all tasks are created equal. Some things are urgent and important. Some things feel urgent but aren't actually that important. Some things are deeply important but have no immediate deadline pressing on them. And then there's a whole category of things that, if you're honest, are neither urgent nor important, and you'd be better off not doing them at all. When you sit down each morning, ideally before you check any messages or notifications, and you sort your day's tasks through this lens, you make better decisions. You stop letting other people's urgency define your schedule. You start saying a gentle but firm no to things that don't align with your actual priorities. And you protect the time and energy that belongs to your most important work. Learning to say no, by the way, is one of the most underrated productivity skills there is. Every yes you give is a no to something else. When you say yes to a low-priority favor, you're saying no to the high-priority project waiting on your desk. When you say yes to scrolling for another 30 minutes, you're saying no to the workout, the book, the call you wanted to make. What are 3 things on your current plate that, if you're honest, don't really belong there? What could you eliminate, delegate, or simply stop doing, and feel better, not worse, for having let them go? Clarity about what to say no to is just as powerful as clarity about what to say yes to. The 6th habit is one that ambitious people often resist, because it can feel like a distraction from the real work. But I promise you, ignoring it will eventually cost you more than almost anything else on this list. This habit is treating your physical and mental health as a non-negotiable part of your productivity strategy. Think of your body as the hardware your brain runs on. When the hardware is poorly maintained, running hot, starved of fuel, desperately underpowered, even the best software in the world is going to perform badly. And yet so many of us try to optimize our output while completely neglecting the system we're outputting through. Sleep is the most dramatic example. When you're sleep deprived, your memory consolidation suffers, your decision-making quality drops, your emotional regulation weakens, and your ability to concentrate decreases significantly. You can try to power through on caffeine and willpower, and maybe you can manage it for a day or two. But over weeks and months, consistently short-changing your sleep is like trying to drive a car with a slow leak in the tires. You'll get somewhere, eventually. But you'll burn out way faster than you should. Movement matters too. You don't need a gym membership or an elaborate fitness routine. 20 minutes of walking, some simple stretching, a few sets of bodyweight exercises, these aren't just health habits. They're cognitive performance habits. Physical activity increases blood flow to the brain, boosts mood-regulating neurotransmitters, and has been shown repeatedly to improve focus and creative thinking. When your body is moving, your mind is sharper. And then there's the thing that our productivity-obsessed culture tends to treat as optional, your mental and emotional health. Stress, when it's chronic and unmanaged, quietly degrades everything. Your relationships, your judgment, your creativity, your resilience. Building even a small practice, 5 minutes of breathing, journaling a few thoughts, sitting quietly before the day starts, is not a luxury. It is maintenance for the most important tool you have. Ask yourself, when you imagine your most productive version of yourself, the version that's creating, growing, showing up fully, what does that person look like physically? Are they rested? Moving regularly? Eating food that gives them energy? And how far is that from what your current daily reality looks like? The gap between those two pictures is the opportunity. The seventh habit is one that cuts against a very seductive story our culture tells, the idea that at some point, you've learned enough. That you've put in your time studying, and now you just get to apply what you know. But the truth is, the most effective people never really stop being students. They just become smarter about what they study and why. The world is moving fast. Skills that were relevant 5 years ago may be partially obsolete today. The industries, technologies, and strategies that define success are constantly evolving. And the people who position themselves to thrive over the long term are the ones who stay curious, keep reading, keep asking questions, and keep deliberately exposing themselves to new ideas. This doesn't mean spending hours a day in formal study. It means building a small, consistent reading or learning habit that compounds over time. 20 minutes of reading each day adds up to over 120 hours in a year. That's a lot of books. A lot of perspectives. A lot of ideas that can shift how you see problems and opportunities. It also means learning from the people around you more intentionally. Every person you interact with regularly has a perspective, an experience, or a knowledge base that differs from yours. When you approach conversations with genuine curiosity rather than just waiting for your turn to talk, you start absorbing something valuable from nearly everyone you meet. And perhaps most importantly, it means reflecting on what you're learning and actually applying it. Information without application is just trivia. But when you hear a useful idea and you immediately ask yourself how this connects to my current situation and what would I do differently if I took this seriously, that's when real learning happens. What is one skill or area of knowledge that, if you genuinely developed it over the next 12 months, would most significantly change your professional or personal trajectory? And what is one small step you could take this week to begin? The eighth habit might be the most overlooked of everything we'll discuss today, because we tend to think of productivity as an individual sport. But the truth is, your environment, including the people in it, shapes your habits, your mindset, and your daily choices more than almost any other factor. There's a reason why certain social circles seem to produce a disproportionate number of high achievers, while others seem to hold people back without anyone meaning any harm. It's not about individual intelligence or talent. It's about the ambient standards, conversations, and expectations of the group. When everyone around you is growing, you naturally grow too. When everyone around you is comfortable staying still, comfort becomes the default. This isn't about judging the people in your life. It's about being honest about what different relationships give you and take from you. Some relationships energize you and challenge you in healthy ways. They leave you feeling inspired and motivated. Others drain your energy, pull you into negativity, or reinforce habits you're trying to change. Both kinds deserve your honest assessment. If you find yourself surrounded by people who aren't living the kind of life you aspire to, and that's not necessarily their fault, you have a few options. You can intentionally spend more time with people who are where you want to be. You can join communities, online or in person, organized around growth and shared ambition. And you can expand your circle of influence through books, podcasts, and long-form interviews with people who think in ways that stretch your own thinking. Think about the 5 people you spend the most time with right now. Not who you wish you spent time with. Who you actually do. And honestly ask yourself, does spending time with these people make you more likely or less likely to work toward your goals? More energized or more drained? The answer to that question matters. The 9th habit is, in many ways, the one that makes all the others real. Because you could understand every idea in this script perfectly and still not see results if you don't have this. It is the habit of consistency. Of showing up, again and again, even when you don't feel like it. We live in an era that loves dramatic transformation stories. The overnight success. The breakthrough moment. The single decision that changed everything. And while pivotal moments do exist, they are almost always the visible tip of an invisible iceberg made up of thousands of ordinary, unremarkable days where someone chose to do the work anyway. The compound effect of small, daily actions is staggering when you actually do the math. 30 minutes of deliberate practice every day adds up to over 180 hours in a year. That's a serious level of investment in any skill. But it only works if the 30 minutes happens every day, not whenever you feel inspired, not when conditions are perfect, not when motivation strikes. Every day. This is why building habits is more powerful than relying on motivation. Motivation is a beautiful but unreliable visitor. Some days it shows up in abundance. Other days it's nowhere to be found. If your progress depends on its arrival, your progress will be inconsistent. But habits, the things you do automatically, without needing to decide or feel ready, those happen whether motivation shows up or not. The key is making your important daily actions as automatic as brushing your teeth. Not because they're easy, but because they're non-negotiable. You've decided. The question isn't whether you'll do it today. The question is only what time. One practical tool here, track your consistency visually. Whether it's a simple calendar where you mark off each day you followed through, or an app that shows your streak, the visual record creates a kind of accountability and momentum that's surprisingly powerful. Missing one day feels uncomfortable. Missing 2 starts a streak you don't want. This is sometimes called not breaking the chain, and it works. Here's a question worth sitting with. What daily action, if done consistently for the next 90 days without exception, would you be most proud of? Whatever that is, that's your next keystone habit. Start small enough that you can't talk yourself out of it. Then show up for it every single day. And that brings us to the 10th and final habit. And I want to be clear, this isn't an afterthought. This might actually be the foundation that everything else is built on. It is the practice of gratitude and the cultivation of a genuinely positive inner orientation toward your life. Now, I know how that can sound. Gratitude has been talked about so much that it's started to feel like a platitude. A nice idea that doesn't really move the needle on anything practical. But here's what the research actually shows, and it's more interesting than most people realize. When your brain is in a state of chronic anxiety, resentment, or scarcity thinking, when your default mental posture is all the things that are wrong, missing, or threatening, your cognitive resources get redirected toward threat detection and emotional regulation. You literally have less mental capacity available for creative thinking, problem solving, and focused work. Stress narrows your perspective. It contracts your thinking. It makes everything feel harder than it is. Gratitude doesn't just feel good. It actually expands your cognitive bandwidth. When you regularly practice noticing and appreciating what's going right, not in a forced, denial of real problems way, but as a genuine daily practice, it shifts your brain's default orientation. You start scanning for opportunity instead of threat. You start noticing possibility instead of only obstacles. And paradoxically, that shift makes you more capable of dealing with real challenges, not less. The practice itself is almost embarrassingly simple. Each night, before you sleep, write down 3 to 5 things from that day that you're genuinely thankful for. They don't have to be big. A conversation that went well. A meal you enjoyed. A moment where you felt clear-headed and capable. A problem you solved, even a small one. The act of naming these things, in writing, is what matters. It anchors your brain in what's real and good, rather than leaving it to ruminate on what's wrong. And in the morning, before the day's noise rushes in, take a moment to set your internal compass. Not with affirmations that feel hollow, but with a genuine reflection on what you're looking forward to, what you intend to create today, and who you want to be in the hours ahead. This is not magical thinking. It's intentional priming. You're deciding in advance what kind of day this is going to be. Here's my final question for you, and I want you to actually think about it. If you genuinely believed, not just hoped, but believed, that your life 1 year from now could look completely different in all the ways that matter to you, what would you start doing differently tomorrow morning? Whatever came to mind, that's your answer. Not a plan for someday. An answer for tomorrow. Let's bring everything together now, because I want this to land not just as information, but as something you carry forward. We talked about starting each day with deliberate intention, choosing the 3 things that matter most before the world gets to define your priorities. We talked about building protected windows of focus, guarding your attention like the precious and finite resource it truly is. We talked about directing your energy consciously, not scattering it across everything, but channeling it toward the work that actually moves you forward. We talked about confronting avoidance directly, not with willpower alone, but with smart strategies like small steps, self-imposed deadlines, and immediate action. We talked about the power of clear priorities, of learning to distinguish what's truly important from what merely feels urgent, and of building the courage to say no. We talked about treating your physical and mental health as core infrastructure, not optional extras. We talked about staying curious, staying in the learner's mindset, and committing to continuous growth. We talked about the people around you and the profound, often invisible influence your environment has on who you're becoming. We talked about the unglamorous, underrated power of consistency, of showing up day after day, whether or not you feel like it. And finally, we talked about gratitude, not as a soft add-on, but as a genuine cognitive and emotional practice that shapes the lens through which you see your life and your possibilities. None of these habits requires a dramatic overhaul. None of them asks you to become a different person overnight. They ask you, simply, to make a series of small, deliberate choices every day that gradually, quietly, and then suddenly and dramatically shift the trajectory of your life. Time doesn't pause while we figure out how to use it better. Every day that passes is a decision, either one you made consciously, or one the default made for you. And you now have enough to start making those decisions differently. So let me end with this. Not a summary. Not a recap. Just one thought to carry with you. The version of you that is living the life you actually want? They didn't arrive there through one big dramatic leap.